China has secrets. That much is obvious. When she traveled to Paraguay to visit her family, she wanted to hear the whole story about Wenceslau and finding the Simon Bertoni treasure. Everyone was happy to see China, but something was amiss. When goons dressed up as the secret police come storming into the house to arrest her, even the Bertoni family was surprised that she had vanished. Then Johnny, a new teacher from school, finds listening devices in the house. Things are starting to get out of hand. Apparently, some people think that China killed General Stroessner 20 years ago and may still know where he buried the Stroessner fortune. Whoever controls that fortune controls the future of Paraguay. Serious stuff indeed. Family Matters is the second in a series of 3 books, Family Secrets, Family Matters, and Family Ties, about the Bertoni family and their adventures in Paraguay. Prelude China got off the plane in Asuncion Airport, but her family was not there to welcome her. She had not told them she was coming. It was better that way. Besides, she had things to do in Paraguay that are better done quietly before she goes to the Simon Bertoni Foundation house and surprises her family. And they will be surprised. They think she is unable to travel, that she is old and frail and ready to die. Far from it. She is still strong and spry and able to get around. But still, she has to be ready to die, especially now. Maybe not from old age, but Paraguay is dangerous for her still, and she does not take that lightly. She has people to meet and things to arrange, and with any luck, she may make it through the next year alive. Chapter 1. Jane Bertoni's life was getting more interesting every day. Yes, she was disappointed that Miguel Angel was her brother, but she was also relieved. She genuinely likes him. Not just as a boy, but as a person. They go everywhere together. They hang out at school, obviously, and most people thought they were together, and they told nobody anything different. The family decided to keep the whole affair strictly in the family. It was better that way. Nobody knew that Miguel Angel was her brother, and she found the intrigue rather fascinating. It also gets Alicia off Miguel Angel's back. She no longer pretends to be his girlfriend, finally accepting that Jane is his girl. Alicia has decided to stay in Paraguay to finish school, even though her father, Wenceslau Benegas, has moved to Argentina to take care of the family business there. "Jane, I want you to meet Johnny," Miguel Angel said as they walked into the school courtyard. "Johnny?" A young man walked up them and held out his hand. "Mr. Martinez, but my friends all call me Johnny," the young man said with a smile. "Mr. Martinez, glad to meet you. My name is Jane." Jane was a bit flustered. Johnny was very good-looking, probably mid-20-something, and had a fantastic smile. But Jane was confused. "What do you do, Mr. Martinez?" "Johnny, please," he responded. "Okay, Johnny," Jane said. "Do you work for the school? You're obviously too old to be a student." No, I am a teacher here at the school. I teach history and geography to the high school students." "Sorry, but aren't you a bit young to be a teacher?" Miguel Angel said, interrupting. "Miguel, be polite," Jane said. She sounded like her mother. "It's fine," Johnny said. "It's my first job, so I got it. But my English is perfect, and that's what they were looking for. I just graduated from college in the States, but I wanted to come back to my home country. So when I got this job offer, I jumped at the chance." "Shouldn't we be calling you Mr. Martinez instead of Johnny, since you are a teacher?" Jane asked. "I thought about that, but it's not really my style. If the school doesn't like it, we can always start the next school year, right?" He paused. "You guys will be graduating in a couple of months anyways, won't you?" "Well, I will be, but not Jane. She still has 2 years to go." Miguel Angel turned toward her a bit concerned. "I hadn't thought about it before, but do you have any idea of when your family will be moving back to Chicago?" "You're from Chicago?" Johnny asked. "Yes, we are. My parents are writers, and they were invited by the Simon Bertoni Foundation to write their next book about Paraguay. That's why we're here." She turned to Miguel Angel. "I hadn't thought of it either, but I don't really want to go back. I want to stay here with you." "So, you two are together?" Johnny asked. Is that disappointment in his eyes? "No," Jane blurted out. "Yes," Miguel Angel said at the same time. They looked at each other and then laughed. Miguel grabbed her hand. "So, which one is it?" Johnny asked, a twinkle in his eyes. "Yes," Miguel said firmly. "And no," Jane said, smiling. "Both. Neither. We don't really know. We are just going with the flow." "Sounds romantic," Johnny said with a laugh. Okay, I have to go. See you in class. And he strode off with those wonderfully long legs of his. Jane is smitten and she knows that Miguel can sense it. Don't say a word, she said to Miguel, who just smirks at her, let go of her hand and heads off to class. General Stroessner was the president of Paraguay for 35 years until the revolution in 1989, Mr. Martinez was saying. He had introduced himself to the class and has given a bit of background about becoming a teacher, and then has started right in on a discussion of the Stroessner regime and the effects it has had on Paraguay. Jane's hand went up. Yes, Jane, Mr. Martinez said. Did you have a question? Wasn't General Stroessner a dictator? Jane asked. She has insider information now and wants to hear what Johnny will say about it. Not that she can reveal any of the details she has learnt from the Montoyas and her father. Well, for some people he was a dictator, certainly. He paused. But for others he was a great leader and the one who brought stability to Paraguay. Don't forget about the Civil War and the unrest that rocked Paraguay for almost 10 years before he took over. But he violated human rights and killed opposition politicians without a trial, Jane said. And he wouldn't allow free elections for the whole time he was in power. That's also true, Mr. Martinez said. That's why it took a revolution to get rid of him, and many people aren't even sure he is really gone. That made the class sit up and listen. Things were getting interesting now. What do you mean, Mr. Martinez? Asked Lisa in the front row. Maybe you don't know this bit of historical fact, Johnny said, but nobody ever found General Stroessner's body in all the fighting. He just disappeared. But he would be like 100 years old by now, Ignacio said. He was a quiet boy who almost never speaks in class. Yes, probably long gone by now, but I wasn't really talking about him, but rather about his influence in Paraguay, even today. Johnny got up from the desk and walked over to the window. Everybody knows that General Stroessner would never have been able to stay in power if he didn't have the support of El Doce. Who knows who I'm talking about? El Doce are the 12 richest families in Paraguay who really control things behind the scenes, said Ignacio. This is obviously a topic he cared about. They are still the biggest threat to democracy in Paraguay. Exactly, said Johnny. They supported General Stroessner because he supported them. But do you know what else was never found during or after the revolution? The class is silent. The money. What money, Mr. Martinez? Lisa asked again. The Stroessner fortune, it was called. It just disappeared. But it wasn't just money that belonged to his family. Most of it was stolen from the country, especially at them last minute when he knew he would lose. Where is the Stroessner fortune now? Jane asked. Nobody was raising their hands, but Mr. Martinez doesn't seem to mind. No one knows for sure. In a bank somewhere outside of the country, no doubt. Johnny stopped for a moment to think. After the revolution, things were very difficult. That money would have been very helpful in rebuilding the country, but it was gone. The gold reserves were gone. It all disappeared almost overnight. He pauses. The scary thing is that if it ever shows up in the wrong hands, they could use it to destabilize the government, even today. Is the government worried about the Stroessner fortune being used against democracy? Jane asked. That seems a bit far-fetched. Maybe, Johnny said. Maybe not. Obviously, El Doce didn't know where it was either, or they would have used it already to try to influence the new government. But there are people today who are actively looking for that money and plan to use it aggressively to gain power. He stopped, a bit startled that he had said so much. Well, at least that's what some people think. That's interesting, Jane thinks. Our history teacher is a conspiracy theory nut. What a laugh. But she still thinks he is cute. That's all that matters. Chapter 2. China, you're here! Jane and Jeremy ran down the front steps to the taxi as their grandmother got out of the car. Dad only told us 10 minutes ago that you were coming. Jeremy hugged China so hard that she staggered back against the taxi. Hello, my darlings, China said, a bit out of breath. Careful with these old bones, Jeremy. She reached out to caress Jane's face. How are you, my dear? Fine, we're all fine, Grandma, Jane said. Just surprised to see you is all. But glad you made it here without dying, Jeremy said with a straight face. Dad told us you couldn't travel anymore because you were too old, and the trip might kill you. I'm not dead yet, Jeremy, China said. But if you don't stop squeezing me, you'll hug me to death. Jeremy and Jane each took a hand and led China up the steps, onto the porch where Arnold and Annie were waiting. Arnold walks past them to get China's luggage from the trunk of the taxi. And don't forget to pay him, China called after Arnold. Hello, China. Welcome. We are so glad you're here, Annie said and gave China a big heartfelt hug. We have so much to tell you. Yes, that's why I'm here. I'm getting bits and pieces of this adventure of yours from the kids, but I want to hear the whole story. Although they insisted that China rest first, she insisted even more strongly on a cup of tea and telling the whole story from the beginning. In the end, that's exactly what they did. What I don't understand, Arnold said, is why you told me that Lujin had died with her family in the jungle. Were you trying to keep me from coming back here? Arnold wasn't very subtle with his questions. Obviously, he was upset about it still. Arnold, look at me, China says. I swear that I didn't know. That's what they told me. Obviously, someone was trying to keep Lujin safe and it worked. That calms Arnold down somewhat. Yes, I suppose if I had heard that she was still alive, I would have come back here, and she would have been discovered. It was better this way, son. Arnold turned away to go into the kitchen. What I don't understand, Annie said, is why we didn't know you were coming. We would have loved to pick you up at the airport. I had people to see and things to do first, China said. And then she was silent. She would not explain. She never explained. Some people would say she was difficult, but Jane knew it was just her way. Well, I for one am glad you're here, Jeremy said, and the rest of the family chimed in. But China, why are you here? Jeremy always had a way of getting straight to the point. I wanted to hear the whole story of your adventure, of course. No, really, Jeremy said. Why are you really here? You never go anywhere. When we went to the zoo, you didn't come with me. When we went to Colorado last year, you didn't come with us. Why now? What changed? China took a long moment to think, and then she made a decision. Okay, I'll tell you, she said. I came here to die. Johnny clapped his hands loudly outside on the porch. The doorbell was not working, it seemed, and clapping loudly is the accepted way of getting the attention of the people inside the house. The door opened and Jane stood there looking at him in surprise. Johnny, what are you doing here? I came to meet your parents. I do that with all of the students. Didn't you get my email? What email? Jane said. Who is at the door, Jane? Annie called from the inside of the house. Mr. Martinez, my history teacher from school, Jane shouted back. Tell him to come in, Annie said. Would you like to come in? Jane asked Johnny. He nodded and stepped into the house. Jane led him into the living room and introduced him to everyone. And this is my grandmother, Matilda, Jane said, indicating her grandmother seated on an overstuffed chair. We call her China. China made to get up, but Johnny insisted that she stay seated and bent down on one knee and took her hand and kisses it lightly, like a knight in shining armor or a French gentleman would do. He murmured something that only China and Jane could hear. I have heard such wonderful stories about you, he said softly. China looked at him sharply, but Jane just looked confused. Before she could say anything, China interrupted and demanded that someone show her to her room so she could rest. Arnold had already taken her suitcases upstairs, so now he took her by the arm and helped her climb the stairs slowly, one step at a time. Jane didn't think she actually needed that much help. She looked stronger than she lets on. And what were these stories that Johnny had heard about her grandmother? How can we help you, Mr. Martinez? Annie said. Please take a seat. I like to meet the families of my students, Johnny said. It helps me to understand them better when I have some context. He smiled that beautiful smile and Jane melted. Again. Annie and Mr. Martinez talked back and forth for a while as Jane tried to process what China had told them earlier. She had come to Paraguay to die? What was that all about? What do you think, Jane? Her mother was talking to her. About what, Mom? Jane asked. Annie just looked at her. Haven't you been listening, dear? She had to be polite in front of Mr. Martinez, but her eyes were shooting daggers at her. No, sorry, Mom. What are you talking about? Jane said. Well, apparently the Simon Bertoni Foundation had also offered Mr. Martinez here a place to stay. Where? Here in the house? Jane asked. Yes, apparently. He was under the impression that the house would be empty, but he says he really only needs one room. He's your teacher, so what do you think? Johnny turned to look at her, but Jane didn't know what to think. Obviously, there was a mix-up, her mom was saying, but we will ask the foundation for some answers. In the meantime, do you have a place to stay for a couple of days while we sort things out? Yes, no problem, Mrs. Bertoni. There is something about all of this that was not right. Jane was suspicious, but she wasn't sure of what. Johnny, living in her house is a dream come true, but it was totally weird and unusual, and there was something off about him that she couldn't quite put her finger on. Jane followed her mother and Johnny out onto the front porch to say goodbye, and then stood there looking out at the city below long after Johnny had left in his taxi. Something was not right. Chapter 3. "What are you doing in my room, China?" Jeremy asked. He wasn't really mad, only his sister had to stay out. That was for sure. China looked startled as she stood in the corner of the room. She had been pressing her fingers against the wood paneling when Jeremy walked in. "Don't you know where the entrance is?" Jeremy asked her. "What entrance?" China tried to pretend that she didn't know anything about it. "Come on, China, you know what I'm talking about," Jeremy insisted. He was smiling that mischievous grin of his, and China came over and sat on the edge of his bed. She patted the mattress to invite him to sit down beside her. "You got me, you little twerp," she said affectionately. "Tell me about the tunnel." "Have you never been in there?" Jeremy asked. "No, your dad and Lujin found the treasure the same day that we were leaving the country. It was all very sudden. They put the treasure in the house and left a message for me on the kitchen table saying they had found it in an old tunnel behind the cold storage shed at the back of the property." "And you didn't know it was there?" "No, never. I always wondered how Arnold got in and out of the house to see Lujin without me being the wiser," China said with a grin. "He was always sneaking around, and when he mentioned an old tunnel in the note, I remembered a story that I heard from my mother years ago about a tunnel that ran from this room to the old storage shed. I had completely forgotten about it." "And you didn't get a chance to check it out?" Jeremy asked. "I would have definitely checked it out." China laughed. "I wanted to, believe me, but we had to leave the country. Our lives were in danger, so I gave the treasure to my lawyer to set up the foundation and then went looking for Arnold." "He ran away with Miguel Angel's mom, right?" "Yes, he did. I guess he thought I would be all right and that Lujin needed him more than I did. And he was right. But he didn't realize that Lujin's family had already been located, and I knew that they would probably be killed. I pulled a few strings and got permission to use a helicopter and assure Lujin's family that they would not be harmed. As a favor to me, you see, because they had asked me to do something really horrible. Apparently, Colonel Oviedo had his own agenda. Anyways, I had to find Arnold and warn him." China was quiet for a moment. "What did you have to do that was so horrible?" Jeremy asked. China looked at him intently. "No," she said. "That's a story for another time." Then she smiled and ruffled his hair. "Anyways, I thought it was time to check out the tunnel for myself. What do you think? Do you want to show me the way?" "You bet," Jeremy said, and bounced off the bed towards the tunnel entrance. China smiled at Jeremy's enthusiasm, and they spent the rest of that Saturday afternoon exploring the tunnel in the cold storage shed. Jeremy showed her where he kept the key and how to find the candles and matches inside the tunnel at both ends. "China, can I ask you a question?" Jane said. They were in Jane's room, talking about boys and school and such. Jane was on her bed, but China was sitting in an armchair that they brought from downstairs just for her. "Sure, sweetheart, you can ask me anything you want," China replied. "I can ask," Jane said with a smile. "But will you give me a straight answer?" "Goodness," China said. "This family is getting more rambunctious by the day. What makes you say such a thing?" Jane just looked at her grandmother. China relented. "Okay, you have a point, but go ahead and ask and I will see what I can come up with as a good answer." China smiled. "We got interrupted just when you dropped a bombshell on us," Jane said. "Nobody has forgotten what you said. We're just waiting for the right moment to talk about it. Mom is always saying that we need to respect your privacy." "I appreciate it," China said, "but go ahead and ask me." Jane looked at her curiously, then decides to go for it. "Why did you say you were coming to Paraguay to die? Is there something wrong with you?" Jane held her breath. Silence. China sighed deeply. "No, my dear, there is nothing wrong with me. I'm not sick, if that's what you mean. It's just a feeling that I have." China couldn't look at Jane directly. "A feeling?" Jane asked. She shuddered, but China would not say anything else, and after a while, the discussion went back to safer topics, and they left the dangerous stuff alone. but Jane decided to get to the bottom of it one way or the other. Jane remembered the day when they came to her house. She saw them walk up the steps to the porch and knock loudly on their front door. There are two men in long black coats. They are tall and white and didn't look Paraguayan at all. They didn't smile, and they were definitely not friendly. Arnold let them in, and they sat in the living room talking. Jane could hear every word. She discovered a vent in her room that somehow was connected to the vent in the living room, almost right above where they were sitting. She was laying on the floor, her ears glued to the vent opening, listening to the conversation. "What are you doing in Paraguay?" asked one of the men. He was the bigger one and apparently in charge. "I'm sorry," Arnold said. "Who are you again? You said you were from the government. Have we done something wrong?" "Not yet," said the big one. "But you don't ask the questions here. We do. Just answer my questions and we will leave you alone." Annie said something to Arnold, but Jane couldn't catch what it was. Apparently, whatever it was convinced Arnold to answer the questions. "We were invited by the Simon Bertoni Foundation to come to Paraguay and write our next book about life in Paraguay," Arnold said. He was short and curt and was not going to give any more information than was absolutely necessary. "Are you aware that the Simon Bertoni Foundation is under investigation for irregularities?" said the big one quietly. "Your last name is Bertoni, and we understand that you are a descendant of Simon Bertoni himself. Is that true?" "Yes, it is." "And you are the one who found the Simon Bertoni treasure on the property?" "How did you know about that?" "Just answer the question." "Well, yes, but it is all legal. We gave the treasure to a lawyer who set up the foundation." "Were you alone when you found the treasure?" the big one asked. Arnold hesitated. "Yes, I was alone." "And are you aware of the fact that the treasure was stolen from your lawyer soon after you gave it to them?" "No, I was not aware of that." This time there was no hesitation. Her father didn't want to involve Lujan in all of this. Silence. Finally, Arnold could not stand the quiet for so long, and he ventured to ask a question of his own. "What is this all about?" he asked. "Why are you bringing up things that happened 20 years ago? New information has just come to light, and we are investigating potential tax fraud, financial manipulation, theft, and a conflict of interest." "Where are you getting your information from?" Annie asked. "We have our sources." Silence. "What are you really doing in Paraguay?" the big one asked again. "What do you mean, really?" Arnold shot back defensively. "We told you what we are doing here." "Your mother, Mathilde, just arrived in the country?" "Yes, that's right." "What is she doing in Paraguay?" "Visiting us." "Are you aware that she is a political activist who was involved in the revolution in 1989? "Yes, I am." "Did you want to express your gratitude to her? I can wake her up from her nap if you like. She is almost 80 years old, but I'm sure she would love to say hello to a couple of supporters." "We aren't supporters." Silence again. "She is wanted for questioning in the disappearance of General Stroessner during the unrest and rioting on February 3rd, 1989, during the revolution. She is a person of interest, and there is no statute of limitations for murder." "Murder?" Jane's head was spinning. "You can't be serious," Arnold said. "My mother would never hurt anyone." "Obviously you don't know your mother very well," the big one said. "I think it's time for you to leave," Arnold said. There was some shuffling and moving furniture. Jane wasn't sure exactly what was going on, but in a moment or two, she heard muffled voices on the porch, and then later a car engine started up and roared off down the street. Chapter 4. Before Jane could do anything about anything, her life fell apart. There was no time for questions or answers. One day she was there and the next, China was gone. They came at night. It is almost midnight, and everyone is in bed. There was a fierce banging on the door, and orders were given by someone on the porch. No, there was more than one person. Several. Arnold went down to investigate, and when he opened the door, they barged in with their guns and body armor, looking like police but acting like thugs. They were after China. They hardly gave anyone time to think. They knew exactly which room she was sleeping in, and they kicked it open and went in with guns at the ready. As if she was some sort of criminal, as if she was dangerous. The strange thing was that she wasn't there. She was gone, and no one knew where, except maybe Jeremy. Jane's eyes narrowed as she thought about Jeremy's reaction. Even though there was enough noise to wake an elephant, Jeremy pretended to be asleep and only woke up when they tried to search his room. Suspicious. They gave no explanation other than warning us about hiding a fugitive and making sure we call them the moment China shows up again. Fat chance. When they were gone, the house was eerily silent. Jeremy was still in his room. He hadn't even gotten out of bed. Jane and Arnold and Annie all turned to look up the stairs towards Jeremy's room. "Jeremiah?" Arnold said loudly. Then they all rushed up the stairs to Jeremy's room. He just sat on his bed with a big grin on his face. "She's in the tunnel," Jeremy said. In a few words, he described how China had slipped into his room, trying not to wake him, and got into the tunnel before the police even knocked down her bedroom door. Arnold opened the entrance panel and called out for China to come back into the room. He was met only with silence. After a moment, he reached in to grab a candle and matches, and then started into the tunnel to look for China. "Stay here," he said. "No point in all of us going. I'll be back in a minute." "I'm coming with you, Dad." Jeremy pulled on his shoes and went into the tunnel following his father. Jane decided to stay with her mother. But it was of no use. China was nowhere to be found. Even stranger, the key to the cold storage shed on the other side of the tunnel was still there, and the door was still locked. China had not gotten out that way. Where is she? Finally, they gave up. They sat in the living room while the sun came up and didn't know what to do. Annie decided it was time for breakfast, and that kept everyone busy for a while. But where was China? Who was China? Why were these people after her? What was going on? No one knows. "Don't we have better things to worry about?" Jane said to her mother. "Well, it's not his fault. He just needs a place to stay," Annie said. "He seems like a good man." "I checked with Maria at the foundation," Arnold said, "and she said that her husband, Wenceslao, had signed the papers allowing Mr. Martinez to stay here. She didn't know anything about it." "So what is the connection between Mr. Benegas and Mr. Martinez?" Jeremy asked. He was still trying to catch up with everything that is going on. "I don't know," Arnold said. "I think it was just for money. Apparently, the foundation was paid by someone to give Mr. Martinez the house for a year. Wenceslao probably just wanted some quick cash for when he left for Argentina." "I guess so," Jane said. "But we really don't know. Should we let a complete stranger into our house with everything that is going on?" "I don't think we have much choice," Annie said. "Maria says that it is all legal. If Mr. Martinez wants to insist, then he is in the right." "Let's just give him a room to live in and make the best of it," Arnold said. "Agreed?" He looks around at Annie, Jane, and Jeremy. They all nodded their agreement. "Good, it's settled then. Annie, you let him know that he is welcome to stay here, and the rest of you make sure that he feels comfortable. Okay?" Again, heads nodded, but Jane had a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. Something was wrong with all of this. She knew it. "What are you doing?" But Johnny put his finger on his lips, telling Jane to be quiet. He moved into the house a week ago. China was still missing, and the local police are also on the lookout for her. But so far, nothing. Now Johnny was acting strangely. Johnny stood in the middle of the living room, holding up a bunch of wires attached to a button or something. Jane couldn't make out what it is. Johnny dropped it on the floor and stepped on it to crush it completely. He walked over to Jane and whispers to her quietly, "There may be more." Jane understands. They are being bugged. Someone was listening to all their conversations, at least in the living room. "Let's check the kitchen as well," Johnny said softly. They walk into the kitchen, and Johnny started checking mirrors and light fixtures under counters and between cookbooks. Finally, he found another one. He crushed it under his foot as well. "Don't say anything to your parents for now," he said quietly. This was another Johnny, confident, calm, and decisive. Jane was supposed to be visiting friends, and Johnny was supposed to have the house all to himself for a couple of hours, but apparently she surprised him when she walked in. "Why can't I tell my parents?" Jane whispered back a little too loudly. "They have a right to know." "We will tell them together." "Okay, but we tell them tonight," Jane said, "and then you can tell all of us exactly who you are supposed to be and why you're here." Jane glared at him, but Johnny just smiled that marvelous smile of his, and then got on his phone to make arrangements. "Okay, spill the beans," Jeremy said. "What's going on? I hate it when you leave me out of things. No one is leaving you out of things, you little twerp, Jane said. None of us knows what's going on here, except this imposter. Jane indicated Johnny sitting with his big smile on a chair in the living room. Arnold and Annie are also there, a bit concerned since Jane has called this impromptu family meeting. Why don't you start, Johnny said to Jane. I caught Johnny with a bug in his hands in the living room this afternoon, Jane said. Johnny? Annie asked. Mr. Martinez, Jane said. He also goes by Johnny, although I don't know what his real name is. Again she glared at him, but Arnold and Annie are still confused. So he found a bug in the living room, Arnold said. So what? I hope he killed it. Johnny laughed out loud. No, Mr. Bertoni, Jane is referring to a listening device. I found a bug in the living room and one in the kitchen. My people found 6 more in different parts of the house, but I'm confident that we found them all. Listening devices? Annie said softly. She turns to look at Arnold with wide eyes. Somebody has been listening to all of our conversations? Arnold asked, still a bit confused. Yes, the devices have been removed, but that means that the people who were listening now know that we found those devices. Does that matter? Annie asked. It depends on who they are, Johnny said. What I want to know is who you are, Jane asked coldly. Silence. Johnny cleared his throat, looked down at the floor to think, and then looked up. My name is Johnny Quintos. I work for an international security firm that has been hired to protect you and your grandmother, China. He was looking at Jane. I didn't realize that we were in danger, Arnold said dryly. The 2 German-looking guys in black coats that paid you a visit a few days ago were not from the government, and the police that came looking for China were not actually police. All of them work for a multinational security corporation that specializes in black ops and routinely disappears people for a price. How do we know that you don't work for the same people? Jeremy asked innocently. Good, Jeremy. That's the right question, Johnny said, smiling. Frankly, you don't, and I don't know how to prove that I am on your side. You told China that you had heard stories about her as if you were an admirer when you kissed her hand, Jane said. What was all that about? You heard that? Johnny asked. Then he sighed. That's for China to tell you herself. It's not my place to reveal her secrets. China has secrets? Jeremy asked. This is just getting better and better. He can hardly contain his excitement. I knew that my mother was a political activist, Arnold said, but what you are suggesting is that she was something more. Maybe even a spy. Is that what you're telling us? Not my place to say, Johnny insisted. And you wonder why we don't trust you, Jane said. She turned away to collect her thoughts. Can you at least tell us what's going on? Why are these people after China? Do you know where China is? No, I don't, Johnny said. All I know is that everyone is looking for her. She isn't so easy to find if she doesn't want to be found. Again with the riddles, Jane said. This is my grandmother we are talking about. She's almost 80 years old. You make it sound like she is capable of dealing with these goons. More than capable, Johnny says quietly. You really don't have to worry about her. Silence. I still don't understand who was listening to us, Annie said. I would like to know. I have a theory about that, Arnold said, but it is probably impossible to prove one way or the other. Tell us, Dad, Jeremy said. It could have been Wenceslao Benegas. He was trying to find the treasure, and he thought that we knew where it was. It makes sense that he would bug the house before he moved out to try to hear our conversations. The listening devices were not very sophisticated, said Johnny. They could have been bought at any Radio Shack, and they weren't hidden very well. We noticed that, so it could be. What about those big German guys who came to the house to ask questions? Jane said. How did they know so much about what was going on here in the house? How did you know about that? Said Arnold. Were you eavesdropping on our conversation in the living room too? Do you also have a listening device, young lady? Her dad was only half kidding. I can hear every conversation in the living room from my bedroom, Jane said. Somehow the air vent in my room is connected with the air vent right up there. She points to the ceiling. Cool, Jeremy said. Not cool, Arnold said. No more listening to conversations in the living room. Goodness, Annie said. Privacy in this house doesn't exist. Sorry, Jane mumbled. But it's still a good question, Johnny said. Are you saying that these two guys knew stuff that happened in the house that they should not have known? Perhaps they were behind the listening devices. Maybe, Arnold said. Or maybe Wenceslao Benegas and these two German types are connected somehow. But how? Jane asked. Wasn't this Strassner guy also German? Jeremy asked. Everyone turned to look at him. You're a genius, Jeremy, said Arnold. A literal genius. Chapter 5. China sat on the hard kitchen chair with her hands tied behind her, and a blindfold securely in place. There wasn't a sound to be heard except for a low humming noise that seemed to emanate from everywhere. She was cold and uncomfortable, and she was angry. Mostly with herself. She got caught because she wasn't careful enough. She took the tunnel at the first sound of the police coming into the house, but wasn't confident that she would exit through the cold storage shed at the back of the property. These people were not stupid after all, and will have guards there just in case, even though they couldn't possibly know about the tunnel. In any event, she explored every inch of the tunnel for hours and found another way out that led to the sewers, which gave her access to the street a few blocks away. She thought she was safe, but an old lady walking the streets alone at night was an invitation for trouble. Two street punks approached her demanding money, threatening her with knives. She dealt with them quickly, but a police car saw the two boys on the ground and came to their rescue. They called an ambulance for the boys and put her in the back of a police car, waiting for their superiors to show up and sort out the mess. But the superiors were working for others, and here she was tied up on a black site like a common criminal. Soon they will come to question her, and it won't be pleasant. She hears the shuffling first, like someone who walked without lifting his feet entirely off the floor, like an old man would. A second chair scrapes the floor as it was dragged into place facing her, and she heard a small grunt as the man sat down. She recognizes the smell, cigarettes and cheap perfume. "Hello, mi amor," she said. "It's about time you got here." Silence. Then her blindfold was pulled down and she blinked a few times, but now there was no doubt. "I suppose you can get out of those ropes on your own," he said. "That was 5 minutes ago before you got here," China said. "Just in case." China stretches her arms and then places her hands in her lap. The man grunts with satisfaction. Then he sits back in his chair. "You haven't changed," he said. "Yes, I have," China shot back. "I'm nearly 80 years old and these bones aren't used to all this physical activity. Don't you have a more comfortable chair?" "No, I don't." "Well, tell me where we are then." "You figure it out." China looks around at the dim room with the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling between them. The floor is packed dirt and the walls are made of wood. We're in an interrogation room at the farm. La Granja is a black site operated by the Secret Service of Paraguay, so she is in safe hands, hopefully. "Why are you here?" The man wasn't very friendly, which was strange since they have been married for 10 years, back in another life. "Moises, what's going on? Why am I tied up? And why are you the one interrogating me? I thought you were undercover with El Doce." "I retired. They aren't a threat anymore. In fact, they are supporting democracy in Paraguay," Moises said. "Apparently it's good for business." "Why didn't you tell me? You could have come to Chicago to live with us and reconnect with your family." "I couldn't leave Paraguay without raising too many questions." "So what's going on? Can't we have this talk over a cup of tea or something?" "Why are you here?" Moises asked again. "You brought me here, mi amor. Remember? Don't play games with me. You were told never to come back to Paraguay, yet here you are. Why?" China was silent. She weighs her options carefully. "You know why I had to leave," she said. "You killed General Strassner," Moises said. "Good riddance." "I murdered the general," China corrected him. "I still have nightmares. I took him into the jungle on that helicopter on the pretense that I was helping him escape and rejoin his brother." She was silent for a moment. "You did what you were ordered to do," Moises said quietly, "but never in cold blood." Silence. "The boy is in danger," she said finally. "If they find out what I did, they will kill him." "They don't know," Moises said. "Nobody knows. Colonel Oviedo is dead. I took care of the helicopter pilot." "You killed him?" Silence. "But only you have the code," Moises said quietly. "And now we are all in danger. He is my grandson. I will not make that sacrifice." "It is out of your hands," Moises said. "When he turns 19, You can't touch him, China interrupted. I don't care about his mother. She's a Stroessner. But I didn't know until recently that Miguel Angel was Arnold's child. He's your grandson, too. That's why you're here? To save him? We knew about Lujin and her boy from the beginning. We just didn't tell you. China nodded slowly. Because I have the codes and you couldn't risk me coming back. Yet here you are. Here I am. Things are getting crazy these days, Jane said. She and Miguel Angel were walking along the boardwalk in San Bernardino. The sunlight on the lake in the late afternoon was beautiful. Jane had just brought him up to speed on all the events of the past 2 weeks. Miguel Angel has been staying at his family's cabin in San Ber and has invited Jane to come for a visit on the weekend. I think this is pretty serious, Miguel Angel said. We need to get back to the house and talk to my father. He will know what to do. They started to walk quickly towards the town's plaza. How long has China been missing? 4 days already, Jane said. We're all going crazy thinking about what might have happened to her. Johnny said not to worry, but it's hard not to. This Johnny character is another thing I want to talk about. I mean, how crazy is that? Our history teacher is also a security consultant, maybe even a spy. I know, said Jane. There are so many things going on, I can't get my head around everything. Let's talk to my dad and see what he says. In 10 minutes, they were at the cabin and walked into the office, where Juan Carlos Montoya was working on his latest book. Dad, we need to talk, Miguel Angel said. 20 minutes later, they had told their story, and Juan Carlos Montoya sat there with a look of deep apprehension on his face. This may be more serious than either of you think, he said. What do you mean, Jane asked. Let's take this step by step, Juan Carlos said. Miguel, you take some notes and write down any questions we can't answer yet. Miguel grabbed a notepad and his father handed him a pen. First of all, let's talk about China, says Juan Carlos. I know something about her. I've done some research on the family. Jane looked at him sharply, ready to be indignant, but he interrupted her. Not in a bad sense. Trust me, Juan Carlos said. I've been researching a book that I want to write about El Doce, the 12 ruling families of Paraguay, and their role in the revolution. I thought they were supporters of General Stroessner, Miguel Angel said. Most of them were, but not all of them. Some of them believed that democracy was good for the country and that Paraguay was ready for a change. What does that have to do with China? Jane asked. Her name came up in my research, and because I met your family, I investigated it. Apparently, she was more than just a political activist during the revolution. That's what Johnny said, Jane told them. So, who is this Johnny character anyways? Miguel Angel demanded. One thing at a time, Juan Carlos says. Let's start with China. What did you find out? Jane asks. The next few minutes filled her with wonder and concern, partly because her grandmother had a secret life, and partly because of what she had done with that life. Things are getting clearer, but also more dangerous.